we need to come to terms with our reality and with our needs. Migrants are not no threat. Migrants could actually help to regreen the European demographics, to sustain the European economic structure, to produce, even to finance the European social services, to social security.
Mr. López Aguilar, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
We're going to be talking about migration. This is one of the main concerns for Europeans nowadays, and it's dominating the political debate ahead of the European elections in June. The European Union is adopting right now a new set of rules for common management of asylum and migration. Could we start by explaining in a nutshell to our viewers what is foreseen by these new rules?
There are 5 regulations. Number 1, a so-called Regulation on Asylum Migration Management, which is supposed to replace the once called Dublin Rule or Dublin Regulation, which is precisely the one which says that the responsibility of granting asylum and all the services which are entailed to international protection lies on the shoulders of the country of first entry, end of it. That is absolutely unfair. That will be changed with the so-called RAM regulation, Regulation on Asylum and Migration Management. Then there comes a common asylum procedure, also a regulation establishing obligations by all of the member states to abide with in order to comply with the handling of asylum requests and particularly protecting vulnerable people, namely children and accompanied minors and families, so that there is a chance for family reunification and legal counseling and all the services which are entailed to certain vulnerabilities. Then there comes a third regulation, which is so-called screening regulation, namely reinforcing the external borders of the European Union. There comes the Eurodac regulation, which is fingerprinting and biometric identification of all persons entering the external borders of the European Union with a single databases, which is handled by EU-LISA, which is a specialized agency of the European Union. And the 5th regulation, which is leaning on solidarity, is the crisis regulation, of which I was the rapporteur. In situations of massive entry of third country nationals or stateless persons, particularly after search and rescue operation, there comes a special solidarity mechanism offered by the member states to assist the country which is in crisis, a EU relocation coordinator which is meant to assist the relocation programs which are to be activated and relocation programs with a certain governance and also certain derogations as to the ordinary rules of the management of the European Common Asylum System. All of those files are intertwined. They are interrelated.
And will these new rules, which we're calling the migration package, will they be enough to solve European Union's problems when it comes to migration? Or what will the new parliament that will take off later this year will have to look into now?
You know, when we talk of 5 regulations which are intertwined, making up a system, no one can be satisfied, let alone happy, about the outcome. This package was extremely difficult to negotiate, at times frustrating, because it wasn't possible to have it your way. You have to negotiate first with 5 negotiating teams altogether, so that we make up a system, considering that all negotiating teams are composed of representatives of the variety of political groups of this House, and then facing the Council with 27 member states represented with an extreme variety of interests and priorities, not the same being Baltic that being South Europe, not the same to be Poland that to be Portugal or to be Spain. It's a completely distinctly separate priority, so we have to work real hard in order to have it adopted. And finally, in the end, we're making a step forward. But that not be the end of the story. Then we will have, first, to secure implementation, then we will have to secure law enforcement, and of course, there will be some other pending issues which are not comprehended in the pact and are extremely relevant. First, cracking down on the business model of smugglers and trafficking of human beings. That's one thing. Second, a European search and rescue framework. Third, negotiating with diplomatic strength dignified readmission agreements with countries of origin and transit. And fourth, opening legal pathways, which is absolutely essential for all of the three that I had just aforementioned to be actually taken seriously. Because if there are no legal pathways, trafficking of human beings and smuggling will be big business. And there is no way you can negotiate with third parties. The third party will tell you, you're simply asking me to retain my people in my territory with nothing in return? That is absolutely unacceptable.
Talking about that precisely, we have seen in the past how some neighboring countries have tried and used migration to pressure European Union towards their interests. We can remember Turkey in 2020 when the European Union was pressuring for fundamental rights and for the government to stop their plans to drill for oil and gas off the coasts of Cyprus. Will this new set of rules make the EU stronger facing those threats?
You have to face facts. And the fact is that when the European Union does not have a system, does not have a legal framework, the European Union shows weakness to its neighbors, and neighbors take advantage of your weakness. That is a matter of engaging in serious talk with your neighbors under mutual respect, mutual interest, and quid pro quo approach. That is the kind of diplomacy that the European Union has to build on. But as for now, the situation has not been so it's very frustrating. Any neighboring country will put pressure by conveying people to your coasts, and you will rush out of panic into that particular country in order to offer some 100 million euros so that that ruler will stop that migratory flow to your the territory of the European Union. Is that a policy? Is that a system? The answer is not. We are not making sense of this kind of action-reaction, ad hoc kind of solutions, putting parches. We have to do better, and the only choice is making it, first, together, if we want to be effective, and second, making it consistent with our values and with our laws. That is the kind of effort we have carried out through the years in this European Parliament, and that is the kind of message we have conveyed to the Council through the negotiations of the Migration and Asylum Pact.
So this will be in the agenda of the new Parliament as well?
Oh, sure. I mean, this is not the end of the story, but at least it's a start.
Well, we see that there is a growing concern that the arrival of new migrants might represent a burden to the national security system to some countries. But at the same time, there is also studies that say that the European Union might need more migrants to cope with the lack of labor force because the population is growing old and some sectors are already facing shortages. How to conciliate these two realities?
You made a point which I subscribe to. Migration is no crisis. Migration is no accident. Migration is not a situation that we are facing now, but maybe tomorrow will wither away. If we exert the right pressure on the migration flows, then there could be a time in which there would be migration zero or no migration at all. That's stupid. It'll never happen. Migration has always existed. It'll always exist. But now in a global world, we need global actors to deal with facts. Can we do it individually, member state by member state? No. It takes a European scale of response. There has been, first of all, some kind of an anti-migratory attitude that has been exploited by many, even political platforms, exploiting the fear that they have spread against migrants. As migrants were a threat, they are not, and let alone say they are not conspiring against Europe. Migrants are moving all through the planet, and some of them are aiming Europe. They are simply seeking for opportunities or fleeing from despair or from violation of basic human rights or from prosecution. If we do it together and consistent with EU laws, then we have a chance to be effective and succeed. If we do it out of panic in ad hoc kind of action-reaction situations, then we don't have a chance to stand up or succeed.
You mentioned changing the way that we see migration. Greece is already changing that. They just passed a bill in December granting residence and work permits to migrants who have been living in the country for at least 3 years. And government says it's necessary to fill the shortage of labor force in some sectors like agriculture and construction. Do you think this would be a way to go for other countries as well?
Absolutely,
like Spain?
absolutely. It's only a fact that the European Union is aging. We are declining in population. When we compare our situation as to 50, 60 years ago, we are shrinking in every possible way, in population, in GIP, in relevance in global economy. So we need to come to terms with our reality and with our needs. Migrants are not no threat. Migrants could actually help to regreen the European demographics, to sustain the European economic structure, to produce, to finance the European social services, to social security.
And how can the European Union reassure some people that think that the migration can contribute to increased crime and violence in their countries and regions? How can we reassure them?
This is a long story. If you want me to be honest, first of all, I'm a fighter against that kind of demagogic negative rhetoric. Migration and asylum-related issues is a field in which very expressively facts and impressions do not match. It's not true that migrants are the root cause of crime across Europe. It's not true that when you have migrants, public safety or insecurity is fueled because of migrants. But still, I am well aware that many people do think that is the case and do see it that way. So it takes a lot of media involvement. It takes a lot of fact-finding, a lot of policy making. It takes a lot of education. It takes a lot of political fight and social fight in order to make it right and to strike it right. Actually, most of the irregular migrants that come out of despair to the European Union are actually harmless. And that is an experience. I'm a Canarian, I know what I'm talking of.
And I wanted to talk also about Frontex, the European Coast and Border Control Agency. It has been accused in the past of involvement in pushbacks of migrants that were trying to reach the Greek coasts. Your committee, the Committee for Home Affairs, has investigated these allegations. And what were the conclusions that you took, and how can the Parliament help avoiding these things to happen?
Once upon a time, Frontex didn't exist. I was minister by then of the Spanish government. Frontex didn't exist, and we were striving hard for it to exist. It came up to life, and then it started growing and growing and growing to become the giant agency in the EU constellation. Now it's the biggest and the heaviest of them all. And still under the examination, the thorough, relentless examination of the European Parliament. Of course, we have a monitoring group, but also other relevant institutions and agencies. And as a result, there have been a number of cases under criticism leading to some kind of political tug-of-wars and episodes, including the resignation of the former director of Frontex and then a new person in place, now new director Hans Leitings, which is showing better will to cooperate with the European Parliament in the continuing oversight and care for fundamental rights, and has finally deployed the fundamental rights monitors and agents and officials of Frontex, and is trying to improve the behavioral pattern of Frontex so that criticism will give way to a new state of the play with a more positive assessment. But yes, it's the fight, and the fight goes on. We are very much engaged in following closely, step by step, the delivery of Frontex agency, under the assumption that Frontex does exist, and in my understanding, it should keep existing.
It's necessary.
Yeah, it's necessary. It's a good contribution to the kind of cooperation that the member states need when it comes to the European scale of assistance. But still, it has to be absolutely consistent with its mandate, and particularly with fundamental right commitment, which is a must when it comes to every field of action of EU law.
And one last question before I let you go. Part of the European Union's strategy to halt illegal migration includes helping countries of origin to deal with their own problems. How is this done concretely, and is this being effective?
That is a major point. I made it myself. I said that once we have the 5 regulations actually implemented and enforced. The picture needs to be enlarged to encompass also the array of issues I mentioned, including, of course, the negotiation of agreements with countries of transit and origin. And in that regard, first thing, the only effective way forward is being united. And then there is another aspect. The European Union is the champion of the world of humanitarian aid and cooperation for development. But still, investing so much, we are not diplomatically effective when it comes to making the best out of our investment in those countries of transit and origin. To be actually effective, to make an influence as to the policy making of those countries of transit and origin, to negotiate institutional development, capacity building, particularly when it comes to values, gender, balance institutions, protection of women against all forms of discrimination, or let alone say consideration of LGBTIQ rights in Africa. That takes European diplomacy. That is absolutely beyond the scope of an individual member state of the European Union, particularly when you face your competitors, which are absolutely ruthless, no scruple at all to corrupt or to influence African rulers with no human rights or fundamental rights consideration whatsoever, namely China, namely Russia. Acting individually, we have no chance to succeed or to be significant. We have to act together if we want to be effective.
Thank you very much. From the European Parliament in Brussels, I'm Marcia Di Sotto, and this is Juan Fernando López Aguilar, Chair of the Home Affairs Committee. Thank you.
Of course.